Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and yes, I'm on my own. Some Carter's work schedule has been making it very tough to slot him into these TV reviews, so I am here for Stargirl Season 2, Episode 2. It's called Summer School, Chapter 2. These titles are very easy to remember. I'll give them that. I'm not going to struggle, right? Like, I'm. Of course, now I'm saying this, I'm probably going to screw up with the titles later in the season, but so far so good. And we got some interesting stuff to talk about in this episode. We have obviously we're calling her Jenny, not Jade, but Green Lantern's daughter, a prominent character who was giving me major Kendra vibes. And of course, by Kendra, I mean from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Kendra was a character, a new Slayer that appeared in season 2 of the show, and the reason why this was reminding me so much of it is because kind of the not like the focus of it, but there was a bit of a gag where she was a much more enthusiastic student of her superhero Slayerness, if you will. She really appreciated and respected Giles in a way that Buffy was always kind of like. Obviously, Buffy did respect Giles, but she was very witty with him. She spoke back to him. She was cracking a lot of jokes. Whereas Kendra's like, "Oh, Mr. Giles, you're so smart. I should learn much from you." And the way Jenny in this was doing kind of the same thing with Pat and like being awestruck by Pat and, "Oh my god, you're Stripesy. I can learn much from you. Can you teach me how to use my ring?" And then Courtney getting jealous and feeling a little bit left out and like being annoyed at how perfect she is at making pancakes, at fixing the table. All of that was giving me major Kendra vibes, which is not a bad thing, but it was the thing. It was what came to my mind more than anything. There's a lot to like in that stuff. I think I particularly enjoy when it first cut to them after the opening flashback. There's still like sparks from the lights in the background of the kitchen from their fight. And Courtney, of course, says what I thought she should say, is that it doesn't matter what's going on here. She broke in the house in the middle of the night. I am not unjustifiable here in my actions. This is sketchy. And it continued to be sketchy. To the point where it actually kind of annoyed me how much everyone else just kind of brushed it off. To the point where, like, she's been offered like Courtney's room. Courtney, you can sleep on the couch. Let Green Lantern's daughter. Barbara offers her Courtney's bed. I'm like, she still broke in the house in the middle of the night. Can we not address that a bit more directly, please? So I guess minor critique for that, but there is the flashback, which is Jenny leaving her house, or her like halfway house or orphanage, if you want to call it that, her foster home, whatever the exact term is. I thought it was a little bit strange that this flashback, which is only 6 days ago, it's not a long time ago, I thought it was weird that they were making her leave when it was already nighttime. That seemed a bit odd to me. That feels like, more of a morning activity, and give the person a chance to go and arrange somewhere to stay that night, for example. It felt kind of weird to kick someone out and say, "Hey, no, you're an adult now, but it's already this time and you have to go find a place to stay for the night." And I don't know, that felt a bit weird to me. Maybe it's just because they wanted the scene to have a bit more drama, because it's more dramatic at night time, and especially if you've got some glowing green light, that's going to look better in the dark. So I guess that's why. So while she has a variation of her name, although they may still use Jade at some point, she does have a brother. They name drop the brother. We see the brother's name is Todd, which is accurate from the comics. Todd is the son of Alan Scott, so that's neat. Also, it's not just street names and university names that are named after comic book creators. I did notice the woman who was running the foster home was a Mrs. Ordway, Jerry Ordway, of course, favorite comic book creator. So that's all cool. But you have her get this little tin that she was told to be given when she was, of age and leaving. And she opens it. There's a little toy car with the name Todd underneath. And there's the Green Lantern ring, which lights up, flies around a little bit, goes onto her finger, and that kind of is what directs her to Courtney's house, which is it's actually a little similar to the staff in a lot of ways. The mind of its own, kind of like guiding the person to a place and all that stuff. So, which I guess helps with the comparison, because I mean the main dramatic thing for this episode is the comparison between Courtney and I keep what I call her Jade. Like it's really difficult, guys. I'm not going to lie, but that's the main crux of the episode, right? Is to compare these two characters. And then the big thing, the big final kind of like nail in the jealousy head, if you will, for Courtney is that Jenny is actually the daughter of a superhero. Although I do like that they point out later on that also is Rick. Like we already had a character who was actually the child of one of the JSA. But this one's a lot more comparable to Courtney. It's another girl. It's another, the lantern ring being kind of similar to the staff in some ways. The idolization of Pat, which is kind of almost like encroaching on her territory. And even the fact that her mum likes her and everyone's like rooting for her. Everyone loves her pancakes. It's one of those things where when she's at school, cause summer school that is, and Yolanda's there too, which they just kind of write a quick reason, even though she's a good student. Like, our parents wanted to keep her out of trouble, so they put her in summer school. Which is fine. It's one of those things where maybe it sounds a bit forced, but at the same time, I'm like, given what we know about her parents, it doesn't seem that out of character for them to just do this. I mean, I didn't realize you could just put someone in summer school even if they didn't need to go. I didn't realize that was an option, but I'll roll with it. It's fine. But they're sitting at lunch, and it's obvious. Like Courtney starts monologuing about why she doesn't trust her, and it sounds a little paranoid, right? And this has really made me think of Buffy and Kendra. It's like, she's so nice, and she's making pancakes. Like Buffy definitely had moments like that where she was like talking about how great Kendra was, but like how she was using all that to be suspicious. Like, I'm so suspicious. In fact, if anything, maybe the better comparison for that to a Buffy episode is probably Ted, who did turn out to be untrustworthy for a number of reasons. Maybe that's what I'm mixing that particular point up with. But regardless, it was kind of obvious that because she presents like a little tub, like she's got a little Tupperware tub of some pancakes from the breakfast that she didn't eat, and she sort of says, and she even made pancakes, and then she goes on this monologue about how she doesn't trust her, or how she's too perfect or whatever. And it was kind of obvious the scene when it eventually cut to Yolanda was going to be her like enjoying the pancakes. Like it was like so obvious that's where it was building to. And maybe this actually does line up with Ted as well as Kendra, because his whole thing in that episode is that he made great cookies. Now it turned out that there was it cocaine that was in the cookies? I don't know, there was some drug in the cookies that was like making them really addictive, shall we say, or desirable or whatever. But it kind of built up to this joke, and it was kind of obvious it was coming, but I was kind of like anticipating it. I was like, oh, she's going to be loving those pancakes. That said, though, I am glad that we're not going to be doing this jealousy thing for more than one episode, and I don't think it's perfect. I do think there's some teething issues with Jenny as a character. Mainly, and this is going to sound like a harsh critique, but I do think the actor's voice is a little grating at times. She sounds a little, I know, Disney Channel, and like her voice at times. So I'm hoping that's something that'll smooth out over time. Because I typically like the plot progression. I like the comparison to Courtney, where you kind of like get to almost like just sort of like summarize her season 1 story. There's a great scene with her and Pat after Courtney's kind of pissed her off a little bit by saying, hey, everyone seems to like you, but I don't trust you because you broke into my house. I don't trust you. You're evil. I think you're evil. And Pat like has a conversation with her where he says, hey, she's just like you were. She's trying to find out who her real dad was, through this object. She's trying to understand who she is. And Courtney admits that it felt very lonely when she didn't realize that, and then later on in the episode, she flat out says to Pat, I should have treated you more like she did, when we first moved here, and she has some guilt over that. So I thought this was a neat kind of way to like bring back in some of like her character arc from season 1, and have her reflect back on it, and have this kind of other character as a cipher to make her realize kind of all the growing she has done, and that she still has potential for more growth. And Pat even says, like, your greatest strength isn't you using that staff, it's the fact that you see good in people, and you did it with multiple people. She names all the all the young GSA members. Like you saw it in all of them. Why not her too? Um, so it's good. And obviously the other Green Lantern stuff is the Lantern's tied to Jenny's emotions, and it kind of like goes a bit chaotic at times when she gets upset or she's stressed, but she does make a construct. She's able to make the toy car, which looked kind of fun. Honestly, it was kind of nice seeing a Green Lantern construct and something, because we don't. I mean, we had a bad Green Lantern movie, and as far as live action Green Lantern goes, that's pretty much it. We don't have a whole lot of good examples. It's kind of funny to me that like there's not a lot. Obviously, there's not a lot of competition, but this version of Jade might actually be the first really fleshed out and good Green Lantern in live action that we ever get. And what's funny is that Jeff Johns is actually working on a HBO Max Green Lantern show that's going to have a bunch of Green Lantern characters in it, including Alan Scott, might we add. So there's a lot of interesting things to sort of think about in terms of that. But yeah, everyone seems to like her. If I was to critique this more so, I would say that maybe it is a little bit quick how everyone seems to love her. Rick seems on her side immediately. Beth's fair game. Yolanda feels like she's trying to like be kind of skeptical of her, but then immediately turns and like smiles and says, "Yeah, you can call me Yolanda." And it's they have this kind of moment which just pisses off Courtney more. A few of those elements did feel a little bit forced. Like it felt like they were trying to rush through everyone else like falling not in love with her, but liking her, just so we could get to the big dramatic beats of the episode, which were better and were good because Courtney's realizations and her growth does make a lot of sense. Honestly, though, my funniest moment of the episode might actually be outside of Courtney just struggling to sleep with the dog snoring next to her, which was kind of funny. But it was actually Courtney coming down to see Pat and being like, "Hey, like, you know what? Lessons have been learned, and I'm going to be Courtney first. I'm going to focus on school, my friends, my life, and if villains show up, then I'll be Stargirl." And of course, at this point, we've introduced the potential threat in the episode. And when he tells her this, I think the performance from Brett Messenger here, where she looks like she's about to explode with excitement. Like she's been very genuine. She's came down here to say, "No, I'm going to do this right," but she's so excited that immediately she has a reason to be Stargirl again. The way she yells, "I'll get my staff" at the end of her like hold it in is just it's delightful and is it's kind of adorable, to be honest. So cool stuff. They've got like a villain to deal with as the other villainous stuff is building up in the background, and we should probably talk about the villain a little bit. Credit to the costuming here, I would say, because knowing this character from the comics, I immediately was pretty sure I knew who this was. We have his big entrance where he rolls into town in his fancy car. He gets out, he's got a top hat, he's got a cane, and I'm immediately thinking, this seems a lot like the Shade. And he goes to see Barbara, who is still working at Town Hall, and he wants to buy all of the magician's old stuff. And she's like, "That's a bit weird, but sure, I'll talk to the committee and see if they're game for selling it." And he's like, "Oh, delightful." But credit to her, because they're doing this thing where she's in on everything now. So she recognizes this is a bit weird and suspicious, so she calls Pat, and Pat goes to try and bump into him, quote unquote, accidentally, and try and gauge who he is and what he might be there for. And sure enough, he recognizes enough that he's able to just like make the leap that this is probably the Shade, and the name that he had is the Shade's name, and I've forgotten what it is off the top of my head. I will check it, but yes, where are we? Richard Swift, that was the name. Which is the Shade's name from the comics. So it's one of those things. If you remember that was his real name from the comics, as soon as he introduced himself, you would have known that that's who it was. If you didn't already get it from the visual, which they could have swerved me, but it'll look the Shade. And this is a fun villain. I like how overly posh and British he is, and how theatrical he's kind of coming across. He seems like a fun first chunk of the season villain before we get to the real meat of the Eclipso stuff, when that really takes over the overall plot. It seems like a fun villain as well to battle with our new Green Lantern, because one of the things that I left out in the other plot is that, when she does kind of get upset and the Green Lantern's going to explode, it comes after her kind of admitting like the only thing she really wanted was to use the ring to find Todd, to find her brother, which none of them seem to really know about until she mentions it. And we get this big ending where she has to absorb the energy and explode, and they all think she's dead for a second, but then she's like flying with the green flame. Some little things on the Green Lantern and the flame as well, actually, is that I like that it's more of a wavy line, because that does make me think of Alan Scott's Green Lantern ring, which is very different from the Green Lantern of the Green Lantern Corps, which is all your other Green Lanterns, your Hal Jordans, your Kayla Rayners, your Jessica Cruz, so on and so on. This is the Golden Age Green Lantern ring. Usually, what did, or at least from what I have seen of it, tended to be less of a straight line and more of a swirly line, and there tended to be like a sort of flame-like quality of the green light that was around him when he's flying or around his constructs, which is a little bit different from the Green Lanterns of the Silver Age that we mostly know and use going forward from that point. So I like those design choices. I think probably John's, being obviously the one running the show, was going out of his way to make sure all these little details felt like they were clicking for DC fans and were true, especially since he's also making a Green Lantern show, so it probably benefits everyone if they are distinct and there is a clear difference between these green constructs and the way this power works, even though there's obviously a lot of similarities, but you want to have the distinction of this is the JSA Golden Age Green Lantern, and then there's going to be the Silver Age stuff in the show, although Alan Scott's in that show as well because it's like multiple time periods, so I'll be very curious to see how if they match up the Alan Scott stuff in that with this. That'd be a very interesting tidbit. But anyway, what I was getting to is the Shade's powers are not that dissimilar to Todd's powers. I'm not going to try and explain them completely because I'll probably just get details wrong trying to do this off the top of my head. But Todd's powers is that he controls shadows, right? He's kind of the opposite of light, right? So it's kind of this yin and yang to his sister, where he can control darkness and he makes constructs out of the dark. He can envelop people in darkness and take them into kind of this like shadow realm. And the Shade effectively can do a similar thing. Not so much constructs from what I remember, but he will envelop people into like a shadow realm. And it'll be very cool to see if we get episodes where that happens to people. But having him to face this new Green Lantern and having her on the team to battle like sort of mano a mano, a sort of, again, the yin and yang of that power divide is really interesting because it is the two opposites, light versus dark. It's, light versus shadow, whatever you want to phrase it as. That makes a lot of sense, and especially if we are going to get Todd later in the season or maybe even further down the line, to establish a baseline for that and go forward from there. And Todd's a character who has been both a villain and a hero in the comics, has sort of had a redemption after some time as a villain, so it wouldn't surprise me to go through those motions in the show as well. That makes a lot of sense, and admittedly, there's a few characters you can do that with. Kind of expecting it from Artemis as well at some point, and maybe even some of the others that Eclipso and Cindy take over at some point, but so some fun stuff there. So some fun stuff in potential. I enjoyed his performance, very theatrical, like I said. And very comic booky, which I'm okay with. Before we move on to the Cindy stuff, I should mention Rick's brief little moment. Actually, which makes me reminds me, when Courtney goes to summer school for the first time, and Yolanda's there, and she's all excited, so she's got a friend there, even though obviously it sucks for Yolanda that she has to go to summer school for basically no reason. As me and Connor said last time, we expect Rick will probably be here because the teacher thought he cheated on the test. And the teacher here, which is who I want to mention, is the reason why I'm bringing this scene up is because this teacher, he first of all said, "It's summer, call me Paul," which, no, that's weird. That's weird. No, look, the one time a teacher in school said to me in like the class, like, just call me by my first name, it was the weirdest thing ever. No, you university, it's fair game, right? It's a whole different part of the world, different part of your life. You can transition into like a more equal footing with your peers and your fellow adults of various ages. But when you're in high school, it's super weird for that to suddenly happen. And then secondly, dropped a Ferris Bueller reference when Rick wasn't there. I don't have a lot to say about this. I don't have like I think Ferris Bueller's an okay movie, but I don't love it. Like I don't have the attachment to it that other people do. Matt, who's on the comics podcast with me, Comics from the Multiverse. It's a DC Comics podcast that we do every week. Check it out. It's got its own channel now and everything. But he loves Ferris Bueller. I that's fine. Like I don't have the same attachment to it. But it's this guy was such a character that it felt worth mentioning. So, Cindy's plot, which actually started with her stepmom, who, like, I didn't recognize her face immediately because it's not like she was there a lot last season, right? And it's been a while. But as she was dancing around and, I think Girls Just Want to Have Fun was playing, and she was drinking and she was just smashing plates and dishes and whatever else. Like, she was so excited. She was taking her packed bags. And then Cindy was at the door, pulled out the Eclipso diamond. And then the plot of this is a lot interesting, actually, because at first you think, okay, Cindy's using the Eclipso diamond to force her to stay. But as the episode goes on, the plot actually becomes Eclipso manipulating her into trying to kill Cindy. And we get some pretty fun visuals, I thought, of like a shadow, a Eclipso in the knife, like in the reflection of the knife and stuff like that. Again, it was very comic booky and very cartoony, but kind of in a way that I thought was kind of fun. And it all bubbles up to the final scene where she does go to try and kill Cindy. Cindy, of course, being Shiv, whips out the blades, fights her back. And she's not going to kill her, though. She doesn't actually want to kill her. And, part of me was thinking, like, what's going on here? Like, what was her intention with using the diamond? And I already had the feeling that Eclipso was, like, working it for himself here rather than Cindy. But I think this plot is to tell us that Cindy is in way over her head, and Eclipso is using her and is going to continue to use her for his own ends. And but it was a cool effect though when he takes over her body and like we get the sort of the purple like divide going diagonally down her face. I thought that was really neat. And then of course he feeds off of her rage and anger and all the rest of it. But I thought the visual of her becoming controlled by Eclipso was really neat. There's a lot of things to like in this episode. It's not the best episode ever, and I think my biggest critique is maybe some of the main plot feeling a little bit rushed, so we can get to the payoffs, while still having a couple of subplots, which is cool, which is totally cool. But I will say that it does suffer a little bit here or there because of that. But I did appreciate that I didn't feel the need to do everyone's plot this episode. Beth and Yolanda don't have their own plots. They're there when they're relevant for the other characters, and that's cool. We can go back to them soon. Rick does have a little bit. We see sort of Grundy watching him from the trees as he goes back to feed him more food. And you know what? Credit to him. He brought a bin bag and he took back the buckets, the empty buckets of chicken. He wasn't littering. He's cleaning up after as well, which is such a weird little thing to make me like him a little bit more. But I was like, you know what? Maybe he really is a hero. He's a true hero. He's even doing this. There's something to be said. There's something to be said for our boy Rick Tyler actually cleaning up after this as well. Because he could, he's in the forest. He could just be like, I'll just keep letting the rubbish pile up. But he doesn't. He brings it back. He brings it. I mean, it's like 3 buckets. He could have just stacked them and carried them back as buckets. It's not like they're that hard to carry. But no, he brought a bag. Which implies forethought. And that makes him a true hero, quite frankly. So, but I do like what generally where all the plots are going though. Like I dig all of the mythology that's came along with the Green Lantern ring and hinting at Todd, hinting at their father, talking about all this stuff. I think everything with the Shade is fun in this episode. Seems like a great B tier villain who will pose a great threat. When I say B tier, I just mean B tier in terms of I don't think he's going to be the main villain of the season. But then you also have this stuff with Eclipso, which is also sort of going along nicely. And this immediately sets up the idea that Cindy's not the one that's really in control. She thinks she is, and she will think she is for a while. And I'm not necessarily expecting her to like become a hero by the end or whatever, but I definitely think she's going to end up helping fight it and then going away or whatever. But she's going to form the team first. She's going to build the team and corrupt all the other characters first, because that makes it obviously way more dramatic. There's a lot of stuff to do there. I think what I really dig about the theme of this season, which is this whole summer school thing, is that it does. I said this in the first episode, but even more so this one, because she actually went to her first day at summer school, and it's kind of the framing device of this entire story. Is that it really does feel like the next sort of pocket, like a focus pocket of a story. Now you still want each episode to feel like a chapter in a story, rather than just like what some streaming shows fail to do, which is just have it's like a 16-hour movie that's just been chopped up, so they all feel really unsatisfying on their own. This still had endings, it still had cliffhangers, it still had stuff to make it feel like the story. You know, Courtney had a clear arc over the course of the episode, so it feels like a finished piece, but it's still a piece of a whole, which is great. It's the perfect balance you want to be shooting for. So fun time. Like I say, a couple of nitpicks, and I do hope that the actress playing Jenny kind of settles into a role a little bit teeny bopper sounding for me right now, but it's not at the end of the world. But the Green Lantern stuff is cool, so yeah, we'll see. But that is Stargirl episode 2. So hopefully you enjoyed some of my thoughts on the show. And I'll see you next time. But one final note. I've got one final note. I just thought of one more thing that I wanted to mention. Actually, two final things I want to mention. There's a lot of little things going into these episodes, and these are both little standalone moments. One, Zeke has indeed installed the flamethrower onto Stripe, and it's ridiculously big, and the flame's huge. And then he says the flame's about weak still, but I'll fix that in a jiffy, and then just leaves. Very interesting. Secondly, the fiddler's kid, Isaac Bowen, his name is Bowen, because get it, fiddling, he's got the bow, it's like a pun. Anyway, this is back to the summer school. He's in summer school with everyone else, and when the teacher says his name and he goes here, and his head's kind of down, he goes sorry, and he says his name again or whatever. But the point being is the teacher doesn't hear him, or at least wants to make him enunciate it a little bit more. And he just he goes from zero, he goes from this apathy teenager to like the grill of like a prisoner who's doing time for like mass murder. He's like, here, Bowen, here. Like he did this like deep menacing voice, like may have been a bit over the top. Is what I'm saying. I mean, it made me laugh, so I got some enjoyment out of it. But if I'm going to be critiquing it, I'll say that it was a bit over the top. And it's like, okay, I get it, you're being moody and you're susceptible right now to being turned to the dark side, as it were. But that might have been a bit much. It might have been, and I mean, admittedly, the other characters do kind of stare at him like, "What the hell, dude?" But I think it's worth pointing out. So anyway, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Ding the bell for notifications. All of these things are important for YouTube channels, which is why they all tell you to do it. So please hit the buttons. It is free after all. If you want to do some stuff that isn't free, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support everything we do for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. And there's some bonuses, of course, and other things. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. Catch us on the Twitters @mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And if you want to check out the movie podcast and stuff over on the other channel, it's Mail Fuzz Movies for the horror podcast, the sci-fi podcast, and some other things. And go and have a look. So there you go. And as mentioned previously, Comics from the Multiverse got its own channel as well. It's also on an audio feed near you. So go check that out if you want to hear us talk about modern DC comics as they're coming out. So that is the show. That is the review. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?